Welcome back to another Boniface Rides XL185 Build Series video. In this video, I'm going to be putting new guards on the bike. They're universal guards from Preston Petty and UFO. And I'll be installing the motor. This is a front guard that I got for the bike. It's a Preston Petty MX style guard. It's definitely a lot better than the original shape. The original shape's quite flat and then it has this weird bell at the end that I'm not a fan of. This will really change the look of the bike. As well as a UFO vintage universal rear guard. This is also a lot better than the original rear guard. This is metal, it's quite heavy and it's quite a weird flat shape as well. So this is the way that the original rear fender sits. It's quite an odd shape and it sits really flat to the rear wheel. And it's quite rusty anyway, so it wasn't really fixable. So this is the way the UFO universal rear guard's gonna sit. It's got a lot nicer curve, it kind of matches the rear wheel a bit better. It's lighter and I'm just gonna have to drill out the holes to make it fit. And then I'm gonna have to modify it as well to fit into the rear cowl that goes down behind the airbox so you don't get all mud up the back of the motor, onto the exhaust and into the airbox. But it definitely sits a lot better. So there's the original front guard as well. Just doesn't quite sit the way I would like it. And it kind of makes the bike look a bit goofy in my opinion. And that's the way that the Preston Petty front fender is going to fit. It's a lot more of an old school MX style and I feel like it kind of gives it that old school motocrossy enduro vibe, which I really like. So I'm going to have to drill the top mount here to mount it to the underside of the triple clamp, and then I'm going to have to cut the back of the guard because it's quite long and it actually rubs on the frame. So I'll make that work. Alright, so I'm going to start off with the front fender. I'm planning to put the original front guard underneath and mark out where I want the holes. Double check that, double check my measurements are centered and parallel. And then drill them out, test fit it, then cut the rear of the guard and then fit it up. So I've got my two marks on the front. I'll just measure them, make sure they're right, and then drill them, and then work back from that mark to replicate the center fixing on the back. The guard's mounted up, and it looks like it's sitting really well. So I'm actually going to mark the back hole on top through the actual mount because I can access that. Then I'll double check where it's sitting. But as you can see, when I turn the bars, the guard's lifting up and down because it's rubbing so much on the frame back here. I'll have to put a spacer on the back of the front fender mount so it actually brings it up further. And then I'll just trim it back here to where it works and it doesn't rub on the frame. So the front fender's mounted up and I've got a little anodized washer in here just to bring the front of the guard down a little bit because it was facing too high up. And as you can see, it's rubbing really bad on the frame. Look, I can barely even turn the bike. So I'm just going to find where it roughly sits fine and doesn't rub on the frame, and I'll just mark that. Now I'll head back over and mark out a nice curve and cut that with an angle grinder. So now I'm just going to mark out a nice curve on the back of the guard. I'm actually going to use my new rear guard to mark out a curve. Just like that. I think that'll look good. Now I'm just going to clean up that cut just so it looks nice, and take the edges off as well, all these burrs. It is a shame to take so much off the rear of the front guard, but it's the only way that it was going to work. That's come up pretty good. Let's get it back on the bike. I'm also using countersunk Allen bolts with the anodized heads. They just sit nicer, and I'll be greasing all the bolts as I go too. There's the front fender mounted up and clearing the frame. Stoked on the look. Now it's time to move on to the rear fender. So I've kind of got that where I want it, and I'm just going to mark the top hole roughly where I want it to sit. I'll drill that out and get it back on. Now I've got the rear mounted. I'm just going to mark out the holes on the side where I want them and drill them out as well. I've now got my 3 holes drilled. I'll mount it back up, see how it sits, and then cut off these little fins as well, because they don't sit right with the bike. There you go, so that's how it's gonna sit. Now I'm just gonna cut it through so it continues the line of the guard down here. And I'm also waiting on anodized washers and countersunk Allen bolts as well, just to top off the look and make the bike uniform. Alright, so I've got the rest of the factory rear guard in. I still need to wash this, but all that I'm going to do now is just trace these lines on the inside and just trim it to that, so I don't see the black plastic from the outside of the bike, and it'll just sit clean. And then I'll figure out a way to mount these two together, maybe just a couple of bolts that are hidden underneath the seat, and that'll work out fine. There's their side pieces trimmed. I'll get it back on the bike and get it ready for the other mount behind the airbox. So there's the front and rear fenders mounted up. I didn't actually expect it to look this good and come out this clean, but I'm stoked. Definitely changes the look of the bike with the aftermarket headlight and the fenders. I'm just keen to see how it looks all together. So now it's time to put the motor back in. Now it's time to get the motor back in. I'm very excited to get this back in finally. It's been quite a wait. And it's all ready to go. Just needs oil. So, should be good. Let's go. So there you have it. The front and rear fenders are on and the engine's back in. It's definitely coming along now, getting a lot closer to its first ride. I'm very excited. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot. And I'll see you guys in the next exciting episode.